First athlete we're looking at is O.J. Simpson.
GSL filmed a show with Simpson back in 1988, 9 years after he retired from the NFL.
O.J., what were your first few years like in Buffalo?
Michael, they were tough.
His host for that show was a young man named Michael Jordan. And at that time, he was just a budding 24-year-old superstar.
They drafted me. They had the first choice. They had the worst record the year before.
And O.J. was the charismatic figure that America had fallen in love with.
Quarterback Toby Page looks over that Dean's off to Simpson. Big hole. He's up to the 40. He's up to the 45. The 50.
They talked about his great college career and then his pro career that culminated in his 2,000-yard season with the Buffalo Bills, something that O.J. was particularly proud of.
I was the first to do it. It was like breaking the 4-minute mile. And I said, my place in football has been set, that I am a part of the legacy of this game.
Well, after the game, you went to the press conference with an unusual entourage.
Well, they came in and they asked me to go into a press conference. The press wanted to talk to me about breaking a record, and I play a team sport. So I said, hey, I'm not going into any press conference without these guys. And they said, okay. So our offensive unit went into the room, and I felt, hey, they should take their bows with me because we did it as a unit.
So 7 years after this interview, O.J.'s straight road to stardom took a detour and ended up on a car chase on an LA freeway that would become one of the most incredible and bizarre stories imaginable.
Yeah, and here's a brief summary of what happened that night and in the subsequent weeks and months if you weren't alive when it happened or if you just missed the trial of the century. On the evening of June 12, 1994, O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman were stabbed to death outside of Brown's Brentwood, California home. Their murders and their subsequent arrest of the former NFL star ignited a series of events that America's legal system and media had never seen before.
The trial was beamed to every household in America, and there were new courtroom people who became stars like Marcia Clark and Johnny, if it does not fit, you must acquit Cochran. Well, after an 11-month trial, O.J. was acquitted.
11 months, and seems like a really long time when you look back at it, but when it was happening, people were living by it day by day.
Yeah, this is one of the first times where those who were able to watch and had the opportunity to, because remember, it was on Jumbotrons in Times Square and in every household, as I mentioned earlier, where everyone got to see the intricacies of courtroom process. And we were all learning in real time with Judge Lance Ito, presiding over the case and everything. This is one of those times where you saw an entire television network get launched. I think it was Courtroom TV, Court TV, if I'm not mistaken, launched off the O.J. trial. Totally polarizing. There are people to this day who have, completely divergent feelings and thoughts about it. But this is one of those moments, as you said, you remember where you were at the beginning and at the end of that trial.
You just didn't miss an episode of Court TV because you just wanted to see where this was all headed. And the hardest part, I think, for people to wrap their head around was that O.J. Simpson just weeks before was one of the most beloved former athletes and pitchman and actor. Yeah. And then for the events to turn and for him to be painted in this monstrous light as a double murderer, it was really hard for people to understand.
What's the old adage, oh, how the mighty have fallen?
Yeah.
We were seeing that descent happen in real time, and you juxtapose it, like you said, against the heinous nature of those murders in comparison to a beloved American sports hero. All of these things clashing in one time. You had the fact that you had a celebrity with such a high profile, with such financial access. Not only was O.J. a celebrity, but like we said, the other people practicing law became celebrities as well, including a Kardashian.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. And they say that the dream team that O.J. assembled cost him nearly $50,000 a day. But I guess at the end of it, when you get the acquittal, maybe it was worth it. But watching that GSL show back in the day that O.J. and Michael Jordan were on together, you tend to look for clues to see, well, how could this have happened? Well, this is the closest we came up with.
Well, you grew up in a pretty rough section in San Francisco, and you did get into trouble now and then.
Most of the trouble I was involved in had to do with aggression. And I was a pretty aggressive kid, and you grow up in a neighborhood government housing projects. You have to be a member of a club. And so most of it was, what kids do. You go to parties, you crash parties, you get into fights, you be pretty aggressive. But I was always a pretty good athlete.
He went on to say that he spent some time in a youth detention center as a kid, and it was the great Willie Mays who came to his house and inspired him to play sports.
Willie Mays was my absolute hero as a kid. And he asked my mother if he could take me with him, and I went with him. I spent the day with him. He didn't give me any speeches or anything. He just let me hang out with him. And I realized at that point that, hey, if I did the right things, that I had the ability, if he would take this time with me, he was a regular guy, there was nothing special about him other than his talent, that, hey, maybe I can make it. And I guess after that little incident, I was determined to be a professional athlete.